Hey everyone, my name is Ryan and I am a Bible nerd. Welcome back to our little series here on the review video for Jordan Peterson versus 20 atheists. I've had a little bit of fun just kind of putting together these little parts, little snippets of that video. I hope you have a chance to watch the whole thing. I think it's really insightful to watch the whole video, but I want to break down a couple more things on this review. Love to have your comments, like and subscribe, all that fun stuff. This kind of new thing I'm trying to do here with the channel because I just love watching ththese videos and I just always have thoughts as I'm watching them. So I thought, why not put together a video about it and just see if people respond to it or how they think about it, and just thought it'd be kind of fun. So here we go. So let's watch another part here of this Surrounded video by Jubilee. They got some great other videos on their channel. Really do love their channel. And I've got some other channels I really want to review as well. So we'll see how this goes. But here we go. We're going to watch another video here of Jordan Peterson versus 20 atheists on the show called Surrounded by the channel Jubilee. Here we go.
My next claim is that morality and purpose cannot be found within science.
Great claim. Oh man, you gotta want it.
What is up, Mr. Canada?
How you doing, man?
I'm doing great.
What's
How are
your
you?
name?
Brian. I think it's interesting that you say that morality and purpose can't be found in science. Actually,
No, within science.
sure.
Yeah.
Purpose, I actually grant you, because purpose is subjective, right? Unless you want to boil it down to the purpose of life is just to procreate, right? Sure, whatever. Morality is actually something that we do see. We actually have examples of Neanderthals and older individuals found in a tribe, missing an arm, missing teeth, still alive somehow in his 40s, 50s, right? Typically, you're a Neanderthal, you can't eat, you can't hunt, you die, right? But we know that members of his tribe were taking care of him, right? So we know that at some level, early in our evolutionary history, we actually developed altruism. We have examples of chimpanzees who actually have a basic understanding of fairness, right? If you give a chimpanzee 2 grapes, right, and his buddy gets 3, right? He actually freaks out, right? But you give both chimps 3 grapes and they're good. We have examples of parrots.
Except for the greedy chimps.
Except for the greedy chimps.
They want 4 grapes.
They want 4 grapes. You know, those do exist, right? But we have
Couple points here right off the bat. You can see even with the Neanderthal example, he says typically they wouldn't survive. That is way more typical. This idea that some of them might have survived because they were able to still add value to their society is not normal. Most of the time, if they did have an arm or leg or something that was damaged or something like that, they would be left behind the herd, or they would be killed by the predators that would show up because they couldn't move as quickly and they'd end up getting predators. So I don't see that as a morality type thing, especially when you're comparing to either Neanderthals or even I think that's an interesting comparison there. And I think that most of the time what we see in our idea of morality is actually against what the social order would actually be. So if it's survival of the fittest, if society determines morality, then it would ebb and flow so much more, because what one society would say would be good would be against what another society would say good. But what we see is a lot of morality, a lot of what we would call that, it actually spans over culture. It's like a step further behind. Now, I think that's what Jordan Peterson is trying to say with this claim, is the idea that science observes it, but it didn't create it. It's kind of morality is a step back behind that. Again, God is a step behind all this stuff, that he's the writer of it, that there's certain things that we know is right or wrong that is outside of ourselves. That's what the whole idea is. And there's things within all time, all societies were always wrong. Now, has there been things that we've disagreed with? Absolutely. There's been things that have ebbed and flowed with degrees of right and wrong, for sure. But there's still things outside of it that we know that there's a God, a writer of the moral law, that there's things he prefers and things he doesn't like. That's the things we should do and things we shouldn't do. And many times the things we should do is actually not beneficial to me or the society or something like that. Because it's all based on societal guidelines, then whoever's the biggest, strongest, fastest should get all the resources. That would be against kind of what we know would be then right or wrong as a moral sense, because it would just be whoever's the strongest, most powerful. And that's what most of our world and human existence has been, until there was this Christian idea, this worldview, the Western ideals that started asking questions like, what is a just war? What is some right and wrong? And we started pushing back on things that for most of human existence, if it would have continued, would have been more tribalism, would have been more the most powerful empire just gets to take everything. The evolution of that would have been worse. Morality from a Christian worldview is actually pushed back on where societal evolution would have probably ended up, because it was starting to ask these moral questions. Like the idea of a just war is very much a Christian worldview, is the idea of what's just in the sense of what's allowed morality, what is right and wrong on a war. Instead of who's just the biggest, most powerful army that can just take that land, they're bigger, more powerful, take it. There wouldn't be any kind of conversation without these types of views. So let's keep watching this. I thought it was pretty interesting how Jordan pushes back that, yeah, there is some chimpanzees. There might be some examples where people do have a little bit of a sense, but it eventually will break. And that's when we then start saying, okay, that was wrong, even though it hurt that person. You know what I mean? That hurt that. He uses this idea of the kind of the grapes. If they're all given grapes equally, they'll do it. But there'll definitely be, like he says, there'll be a chimpanzee that's bigger, powerful, stronger, and he'll go and just take all the other grapes. Too bad. Try stopping me. It's not a moral right or wrong at that point, especially when you're comparing to animals versus humans. But let's continue listening to what he says here.
We have similar examples where we do animal tests, right? And
So morality is intrinsic.
I think
So it precedes science.
that actually
right?
a better way to define it would be that social animals, which we are, right,
Yeah.
require some level of morality or
Into what? I'm not disagreeing.
Sure.
Why do they require that?
Because it's the only way that social groups can actually survive, right?
That's my point with
Sure.
regards to science. Thank you very much.
Is that
Precisely the point that you just made, that science has to exist within a moral framework that isn't in itself scientific.
how's that not
Beautiful. Because like you said, if it's just society, then there wouldn't be a moral compass that would direct the society. It would just be outside of it. It'd just be survival of the fittest. It'd just be whichever one's more powerful, more strong, whichever one is the more right, because it's more powerful to push its own will and its own agenda and its own desires on a smaller, less civilized, less technologically advanced. There'd be those considerations would way outweigh morality. Morality steps in and say, hey, you should not hurt that weaker being. You should give up your seat to somebody that is disabled. You should do certain things because it's morally right, not societal right. Because if society is those governing forces, we've seen it throughout human history, it becomes more tribal, it becomes more strong survival of the fittest. Those are the things that take over from a societal framework versus a moral framework, which is that step further back.
scientific?
Well, because it's not derived from the scientific process, as you just
It
indicated.
doesn't
by
need to derive
pointing
from the
to-
scientific process.
Well,
It's
hang
the
on,
fact that
hang on a sec.
we are social animals, so we need that to exist as a group,
I agree.
right?
No, I disagree. We don't need morality to exist as a social group. You could use better technology, weapons, land, skill, training. I mean, you see societal groups like in the Spartan times where if the child was disformed or disabled or any kind of thing, it was just thrown away because it wasn't going to be able to be of value to the society. And that wasn't wrong back then. That society we look at it now and say, oh, that's horrible that you would just throw that child away or throw out a disabled person or something like that. We've actually pushed back against it because we've stood by a moral compass that is a Christian worldview. It's a Christian, Judeo-Christian ethos that has developed some of these more moral societal norms, not some sort of evolution from man that just all of a sudden say, hey, we're going to be more morally just because we're more evolved. I push back on that like crazy. There's no way. There had to be something outside of society, outside of science, outside of myself that started pushing back and saying, hey, you shouldn't do that. Well, it's like, well, wait a minute. It benefits me, benefits my family, it benefits my city, benefits my whatever, that thing. Well, yeah, but it's still morally wrong. So saying that we're social animals and we need morality to survive, no, we do not. No, I don't think that's, in fact, a lot of times I think the morality is things we don't want to do necessarily, but there's a pressure, there's a feeling like, okay, I should do that. I love the example of C.S. Lewis. He says, okay, you're on a bus and somebody's walking down the aisle and somebody tries to trip you, but they don't trip you. You feel like you've been wounded because you shouldn't do that. Where if you're walking down the thing and you accidentally trip, they accidentally trip you, there isn't like a moral wrong. But the act of them trying to and even not succeeding is worse than actually tripping me and I fall and scrape my knee and actually hurt myself. Well, it's not a moral wrong. It's an accident. It didn't mean to happen kind of thing. But the other person has some sort of intent to harm. And I think morality is the thing that is opposite against those types of things. And I think that's what Jordan's trying to get here with morality and purpose cannot be found within science. It observes it. It can start saying, okay, why do certain things react a certain way? But it's not found within it because it's further back than science can ever get to. That's why you see all these science textbooks. There's always changes in things. Or I think I could probably open up every single scientific textbook and there'll be some sort of phrase that says something along the lines, well, we don't know exactly why, don't know exactly how, haven't figured out this, haven't figured out that. I mean, that's a whole kind of thing because it does develop and it's observant. It observes certain things. It doesn't just, that's why they call it discovery. It's not like it wasn't there before. It was discovered by some scientific methods. So that's where I think this morality is something that's a step back.
But
Sure.
you pointed to the morality of Neanderthals, to the morality of chimpanzees. They didn't derive that from science.
Or
They don't need to. That's not how
That's
that
my
works.
point.
Science explains it. So you
No,
just,
science doesn't explain
observes
morality.
it doesn't explain how social animals would need to be.
Well, that's a
altruistic?
complicated question.
But we see it though.
Yeah, but
No, and I think-
explaining the evolution.
I still think it's almost in conflict with it because again, it's something where it's observing and trying to figure, okay, why did they share their grapes? But then you can still push it to a point where they wouldn't share their grapes. There's certain situations you could add to the equation scientifically that would change that equation. Then all of a sudden, they're not moral anymore. Or now they're being way more moral because they're sharing all their grapes with everybody. You could throw in certain things and all of a sudden they just turn into non-immoral type things. But we'd be able to look at that from the outside, from the observant standpoint, be able to say, okay, all that is wrong. But they're just animals. So it's just animals being animals. So his idea that we have to be moral to be social, I don't know. Now, does it help? Do we see in the Western worldview that we've been able to push back on that and we can see that being philanthropic and being moral and being nice and doing this stuff is better for the overall society? Sure. But it's in spite of it, not because of it, that we do these things.
Of morality and explaining morality itself aren't the same thing.
Okay, so you're asking why does this happen?
Yes, that's more accurate.
Because we're social animals. We
Yeah,
need
but there's
to be,
more to it than that.
Is there?
Sure. For example, so we're moral animals that have a sense of the future.
Sure.
Okay,
This
that
gets a
makes
little
us unique.
interesting.
And that structures our morality.
No, actually, there are other animals that can predict the future. Or not,
Not
predict
really.
the future. No, tigers. Actually, there was a tiger at the SF Zoo that killed somebody. And so
Hunting
actually,
animals.
No. Kids threw shit at the tiger. The tiger actually plotted its escape, and it found the
I'm not
kids.
saying that animals can't think.
Okay,
No,
let's
but they can
pause
perceive
here.
the future. That's what I'm saying.
Well-
Voted out by the majority.
Thank you, man.
Good man. Yeah.
Let's stay. We'll watch this next one here. We got some time. I try to keep these videos fairly
How
short.
you doing, man?
I do like this
Nice to meet
interaction
you.
here. This has got some great
So your claim that morality and purpose can only be found in science is a little shaky
No,
because
no,
I think that
within
your claim
science.
is really being framed to be morality and purpose can only be found in religion. Is that how you're kind of framing it?
I would say that the domain of religion is the domain of morality and purpose. Yes,
Okay.
exactly. And also that science is actually structured, at least in part technically, to eliminate such considerations from its purview a priori.
Okay.
Right? That's why we define science as value free.
Mm-hmm.
But that has to be wrong because scientists have to prioritize their attention
Mm-hmm.
towards something before they can even engage in observation.
Okay.
And that act of prioritization of attention is a value predicated act. And so I can continue. There's all sorts of things we have to assume
Yeah.
about science before it can take place.
Okay, so what I'm specifically pointing out here is about religion in particular, since you yourself are a Christian, right?
People debate about that, and I generally don't discuss it publicly.
Okay, I understand
Mm-hmm.
that. And me, myself, I am a former young earth creationist fundamentalist.
Oh, yeah.
So I have experience in this. I used to run a TikTok channel directed about apologetics about the Bible, specifically in this type of facet with morality, evolution and such, and going back and forth with that. So in the Bible, it talks a lot about slavery, right?
Yes.
Yes. So in that, it teaches you how to take care of a slave. Rather than saying slavery's wrong,
We always got to get into the slavery topic. So I think Jordan does a really good job on this. I've got some big thoughts on it, but I think it's interesting right there that we, in our worldview, we always say it's more descriptive than prescriptive. And I think Jordan's going to tear apart this concept a little bit about the Bible as some condones slavery and actually encourages it. So let's watch some of this interaction here. I think this is a really important topic.
I think
Now,
it
it
should
says
say
that in the story of Moses.
It says slavery is incorrect. It says
Well,
it's immoral.
that's why Moses leads his people away from slavery.
But why does the Bible predicate and tell people exactly how to take care of a slave? Isn't that
Well,
immoral? Wouldn't you say that culturally we've evolved as a species, as he said earlier about empathy?
Yeah, I would say that the reason we evolved, so to speak, away from slavery was because the West was founded on Judeo-Christian morality and the
Yeah.
presumption that every person was made in the image of God.
Wouldn't you
And so
say that-
slavery itself became immoral, and
Yeah.
that was established by Protestant Christians in the
Yes.
UK, who then convinced the
Yes.
UK government for 200 years to go to war on
And
slavery.
wouldn't you say that this is about the cultural evolution of humans in general rather than just
No,
Christianity?
Yeah, see, kind of that same argument before. I would say that humans wouldn't stop slavery. On a society, a human wouldn't stop it because there's a benefit to the society. Unfortunately, there's a benefit to the commerce of slavery. There's a lot of things that's why it was predicated as a benefit to societies all around the world for most of human history. It wasn't until the Judeo-Christian worldview started pushing back and getting enough momentum, making enough of a good argument, using biblical principles to say slavery is bad. And even within the Bible, we can see that it's not good, to the point where they were starting to say, okay, this isn't good. This is the better way to be able to do that. And then also an atheist say, well, then God condones slavery. Now, why didn't he just dismiss it? I don't know. He's got to have some sort of reason, or there's some other worldview that, or not worldview, but there's some reason why it was prescribed to do it better than just eliminating it altogether. So why didn't he eliminate it altogether? I don't know. There's got to be some sort of reason why it wasn't like specifically eliminated. But I do see that it is not encouraged. It's discouraged. It's treated as a bad thing by not treating humans as equally good and created in the image of God. That is predicated throughout the Bible. He even said right there, right off the bat, we got the Exodus story where they were trying to be freed from slavery. And so why did it keep getting introduced? And I would say the slavery in the American continents later on, way after Egyptian slavery and all this other stuff, is going to be a lot different. I even saw a lot of stuff that talked about how after a certain amount of time for money debt, the slaves would be then released because they paid back what put them into bondage. And they were treated better than they probably were in certain times. And I'm not trying to justify the idea of slavery, but you have to admit that slavery in the 1800s, 1700s in the U.S. is way different than the slavery that was in even the Roman time. Not to say it was not an evil and it was something that needed to be addressed, but just to say it's in the Bible doesn't mean it's prescriptive. There's a lot of descriptive nature with it, just like there is with how women are treated, just like there is with multiple wives. There's a lot of things that show it was a bad thing, and that's when, as you start to review and as books are getting spread around, as more people could study the Bible, as you got the printing press and different translations into English, you got this idea that it had to take some time to be researched. But as more and more people started reading the ideals behind Christianity, they started saying, wait a minute, slavery is bad. It's been bad the whole time. Let's abolish this horrible thing. I would say the same thing is happening right now with the argument of abortion in America. We know it's an evil thing. It's bad. But there's still people that are arguing and fighting for it. It takes time for those things, those arguments to make enough sense where there's enough chance to be actually abolished such a horrible thing as killing unborn children. So yes, slavery is bad. It's in the Bible. But I think it's way more, in many, many ways, way more descriptive than prescriptive. So let's see how this conversation continues to go.
I think it's the flowering of the ideas that were embedded in the biblical texts across long spans of time.
I feel like this is just humans editing based on the cultural evolution
And what do you
of
mean
morality.
by just?
Just?
Yeah, just humans.
Well, humans.
Editing.
Well,
Yeah.
based on culture and history, right? We get better.
Well, they
and-
did do it based on culture and history, but
Yes.
culture and history have their foundations too. So
Well, yeah, but we're talking about slavery. So many people bolstered it based on the
everyone,
Bible.
except
Based on the
So yeah, this idea that the Bible bolsters slavery, sure, there's probably some people that say, hey, here's the way you're supposed to treat it. But I would tell you this as well. Even the most bolstered version of the Bible to justify slavery wasn't the slavery that was even bolstered in the Bible itself, meaning that there were certain ways you were supposed to treat your slaves that weren't being treated in these areas that he's saying that the Bible used to bolster slavery. Does that make sense? So it was not even done. If the Bible's telling you how to do slavery, even then they didn't do it based on how the Bible was. But every culture didn't have the Bible. Slavery has been a part of human existence as long back as we could document any human existence. It's been a part of that, unfortunately. And the Judeo-Christian value, the ethos of that was one of the first societal ideas, if you will, or something that was imposed on society to actually ban that thing. To sit there and say that society would just eventually evolve enough to go out of slavery, I'd push back on that wholeheartedly. There's no way. Because until the Bible idea started to come about, that started to be read and understood and pushed back on the evilness of slavery, that's when it started to disappear, not before. So to say that society would just evolved enough to just eliminate slavery on its own, I dismiss that. There's no way. There's no evidence of that. There's no proof of that at all. If it wasn't for Judeo-Christian Western worldviews of morality, of just war, of slavery is bad, polygamy is bad, some of these things that are in the Bible, these things would not have been eliminated by a society's natural evolution. I would say they'd probably be emphasized even more because we can see all the history of what slavery was before and all the way up to the point where it was banned was only getting worse during that time. It wasn't getting better. It wasn't evolving to a nicer, kinder version of slavery. It was getting worse. And that's another reason why there was a rally behind being able to get rid of it through Judeo-Christian worldviews, not just because society was going to evolve to it anyway. I just dismiss that, and I think that's what he's trying to push back on this as well. So let's keep watching the end of this one.
The Bible, they
That's
looked at
much
it and
less
they
true.
justified it in the United States and the Deep South. They justified slavery.
Yeah, but the
based on
main
the Bible.
thrust,
Yes, they did justify it. Sure, they used it, but they didn't even follow the precepts. So they said, here's how you treat your slave. They didn't do any of that stuff. To say the Bible said, hey, you can have slaves. Here's how you're supposed to treat them. Well, they didn't treat them that way. So yes, they might have used bad arguments within the Bible or any other worldview to be able to justify slavery, that they weren't really human. That's an argument. That was a big argument. They're property. They're not really human. They're subhuman. They're property. I bought them fair and square. They're property. That's not even what the Bible says those people are. You're supposed to even honor those people. There are certain things you were supposed to do. So yes, to say the Bible may have been used in certain ways to predicate, to keep, especially in the South, they probably use that as another argument to make it biblical, to be able to do that kind of thing. They still weren't even following the tenets of the Bible to do that. So yeah, dismiss
thrust
that.
of Protestant thought in particular was stringently
Yes.
against slavery,
Which-
and it was about the only movement in the history
Yes.
of the human race
History
that
of-
had an anti-slavery direction.
Which was driven by humans and their
Well,
understanding
that's one
of
way of
morality.
looking at it. Well, it depends.
It's the same with women's suffrage. I mean, women's in the patriarchy.
What do you mean it was driven by humans? Humans drove slavery too.
Yes, exactly.
Well, so there's no argument there. If slavery and anti-slavery were both driven by humans, what does your claim that they were driven
Great
by
answer.
humans have to do with it?
evolving
There's a
morality
specific-
based on the
And if you're saying slavery is derived directly from the Bible, if an area didn't have the Bible at all, why would it still have slavery? If it's just a biblical thing and the biblical excuse to have slavery and God actually mandated that there was slavery, why is there slavery all over the world in all human history, all the way back as far as we can find it? And again, has slavery gotten better in the far of treatment of those people as anything more? Or did it get worse? Was it more corrupted over time or was it better? So I think that he's pushing back on a beautiful part here. And the guy says, well, this is just human. Well, yeah, humans made slavery and they also got rid of it. It's the reasons they did it and the reasons they got rid of it that makes it from a moralistic viewpoint versus just a evolutionary viewpoint.
culture that within the society that they live in.
Okay,
So
fine.
with
I think
women's
that did
suffrage as
happen.
well is a very similar topic in the Bible. There are denominations in Christianity, such as Pentecostal movement, which do bolster women to be pastors, right? Which I think that's a great.
Yes, women have not been treated as well as men throughout most of history. Absolutely. But I think the Christians and some of the documents that we have in honoring of women is so much higher in the Christian worldview. They were the first ones to find the tomb. They're witnesses. They were an integral part of the Christian movement. There's books still named after them. There's still this idea that all women are treated horribly in the Bible, I think is absolutely wrong. Rahab is a major character in the story that is just amazing how they were involved. And there's prophetesses. And yes, is there as much? There's not as much about women. Absolutely. They have been pushed down as a societal group for a long time. And again, would society get away from that or increase it? it would increase that suffrage more than it would, because otherwise it would have been better without the Christian worldview showing up. As soon as that started showing up, I started questioning, wait a minute, maybe we should treat women better. Maybe they should be priests, or maybe there should be some stuff there. That's a whole other argument. But I think this idea that society would just evolve to be more moral, I just dismiss that. There's no evidence of that, because as we see over time, it gets more corrupted, more evil, more flawed over time, not just naturally better on its own legs. It has to have something outside of itself that has a measure that's more holy, more moral, more right and wrong, that you bump up against and say, you know what, we're not following this ideal. As a society, as a family, as a person, I am falling short of the ultimate moral standard, the holiest thing I conceive. I fall short of that thing. And because I have fallen short, I am an enemy of that thing. And that's where Christianity starts to speak. It's the way the substitution takes the wrath that I deserve from that holy thing and takes it upon himself to get me in right standing with the infinite. Ooh. That's what we're talking about here. The idea that these people think that society would just evolve to be better, I just don't see it. I don't see there any evidence of that throughout human history. The bigger, baddest, strongest, most advanced wipes the smaller one out. That's survival of the fittest has a name for that. That's what it's called. And do you really think the human society would have removed slavery? It almost is a disadvantage to that society. The only reason you get rid of it is there's a standard outside of the society that says, hey, that is wrong and here's why. I don't want slavery. I don't think God's sitting there saying, hey, I condone slavery. He was pushing back and given all kinds of evidence that he didn't like it. And even the standard in the Bible has fallen short by the people that had slaves later on. So even if it was condoned, we did it completely wrong anyway. Even if it was condoned, which I don't think it was. Again, descriptive versus prescriptive. Let's keep listening.
Great thing to do, but most like to disregard
Where do you
women.
think the idea that human beings were sufficiently equal to all vote and not be slaves came from?
Humans.
Yeah, but so did the idea of slavery.
So did the
that's
idea of God.
Fine, but what's your
Yes.
point? Like, you're not making an argument. You're just saying all thoughts come from humans.
No, and I disagree. God didn't come from, because in a lot of ways, the ideal of God is a bad thing in the sense of human. We wouldn't come up with that. We wouldn't come up with a standard that is higher and better and stronger than outside of ourselves. That's where we realize there is a God, because we know there is that standard. We know there's a right and wrong that's outside of my own right and wrong. We know, and it's not just a societal pressure. We know there's something outside of that. So God didn't create, or humans didn't create God. God created humans, and we recognize that creation throughout all of the universe. The order of the universe, the beauty of the universe, all those things, even in its fallen state, we can still see there's something outside of ourselves that all this stuff is predicated on.
Humans,
Yes.
regardless of the thoughts.
It's not driven by a higher power. It's driven on our experiences
Define
as
higher.
humans, which is what is best for all people.
Is it driven by conscience?
What's best for all people? I think that's an interesting comment. So if one society is bigger, stronger, faster, and they need the resources of a smaller one, can they eliminate that society? Yes. There's no moral reason they couldn't do it without a moral God. They're bigger, stronger, faster, powerful. They could just wipe it out and wipe out every existence, and they could just wipe that group out. It wouldn't be wrong to that society. In fact, if anything, it would be justified. It'd be like, yeah, we need their resources, or our family can't eat, or our family doesn't get the resources they need, so we need to go take those resources, even if the consequence of that, there's 50 of us and only 2 of them. Let's just get rid of the 2 of them. Why would that be wrong? Without a God. Why would that be wrong with the moral standard outside of the society? Otherwise, every society could say what's morally right and wrong. And how can they say the other society is right or wrong other than they're just bigger, stronger, more powerful?
It could be.
There we go.
Which conscious is also something that has evolved over time. And I think that's
What's
something
the
that
evidence?
does evolve in morality and empathy.
Okay, I don't
Those things
understand the
don't
point that you're
evolve.
making.
They
My
almost
point is that
de-evolve.
God influenced slavery. People looked at the Bible and went, this is moral because God says so, just like women's suffrage.
There's lots
And
of
just
That's not true. God didn't sit there and say, do this, prescribe this. Where does it say anywhere that God said, hey, I like slavery, keep doing that? It's not in the Bible. Now, is there times where it says, okay, if you do have slaves, do treat them in this way and do this type of stuff? Yes. Why is it not more clear to get rid of it? I don't know. What are things in 100 years from now that society will look back at us and go, man, why did they do it that way? That's wrong. Like abortion. I think that's a perfect example of something that's clearly wrong, and yet there's still an argument for it, for society to say, no, it's we're going to have laws to protect abortion rights and turn it into dehumanizing and turn it into healthcare issues and all that kind of stuff. So there's just so much more turning society into the God in the idea of the atheist, that the standard that which we all should fall to is some sort of communal, societal yes or no, right or wrong. And we can see throughout all of human history that can't be the highest standard. There's got to be something that's behind that, and that's what God is.
Like homosexuality.
All human societies were slave owning. So
Yes.
you can't blame that on the Bible.
Yes.
If humanity decided,
Oh, wait, address that first.
What, about
All
slavery?
human societies were slavers. So you can't blame that on the Bible.
well, you can say it bolstered it.
Well, not if you look at the broad sweep of history, because it was the Protestant Christians.
Based
If it did bolster it, then why was it used to eliminate it? Now, maybe it was used as an argument in some smaller cases, but it wasn't what got rid of it in general. And again, I would say, even if it bolstered the right to be able to have it, you could then even go to the person trying to use the Bible to bolster it and say, okay, if the Bible says that slavery is okay, this is how you have to treat your slaves. And they'd be like, well, no, we don't have to do that. No, they're property. So even if you make the claim, which I think is a big stretch, that the Bible is actually bolstering slavery, it wouldn't be the slavery that we saw and eliminated. It's something different because society had corrupted it even further than even the original intent of what we call slavery. Oh, it's such a tough issue. I totally get it. It's ugly. I don't like that there's slavery in human history, especially in American history. It's such a dark part of our history. But it's removed by Bible principles, not bolstered by it, like he said, because even if it was, they fell short of the standard of the Bible when it comes to having slaves.
It's
In
on
the
their
UK,
interpretation of the Bible,
It was the Protestant Christians.
which evolves over time.
Let's pause there. You've been voted out by the majority.
All right. Well, it was great talking
Yeah,
with you,
nice
sir.
talk.
That was a great conversation. Really a deep one, really a tough one. It's a little off topic on morality and purpose, but I think it's a really important thing that us as Christians have to wrestle with. Why is there slavery in the Bible? And I'm still wrestling it and trying to articulate the way I feel about it and trying to use videos like this to be able to see how I would respond to it. It's awful. It's awful. I think abortion's awful. I think slavery's awful. I think there's so many things in human history, such a flawed group, that God still uses us. Even though we fall short of that holy standard, while still sinners, Christ died for us. And these are the things we have to wrestle with on some of our past history. So I hope you found this useful. I'm sure it's going to get a bunch of comments. I'd love to talk with you about it, like and share, but I just really enjoy digging into some of these topics, see how I would answer them. I just love this video. I've got a few more I'm going to do on it because there's a couple other points I thought were really important to talk about, but I just love talking about this stuff, wrestling with how I would answer it, and just believe in the Christian worldview so much. I am an avid Christian. I love nerding out. That's why I got my hat. I got my channel. I just love talking about this stuff. So I want an opportunity to present it in other forums. So if you have other videos you'd like me to comment on, if you want me to be on your channel or your podcast or whatever, I'd be very open to that, trying to explore what's going to happen with this channel and just learning how to do video and learning how to do hashtags and all this stuff. It's kind of a new skill as well. I'll just see where it goes. But I hope that you found this video useful. Let me know what you think. Please watch the whole video. I think this is an incredible video that Jubilee put out. And I've got a few more parts I'm going to put out, but I hope you have a wonderful day, and I'd love to talk with you about it more, and God bless.